So today we're going to talk about Bootstrap. Let's create an experiment where we can play around with Bootstrap. So we're going to create here a page, an HTML page. I'll call it 00 intro HTML. And in here, right? If we run that, we'll see that it's pretty boring. Well, actually, there's nothing in there, right? Let's put something in there. So let's do H1 hello from hello, just hello world. All right, let's save it. Let's reload. There it is, right? So notice that the browser has the default styling, Times Roman, and it's black and whatnot, right? Let's let's use the Bootstrap default styling by copying it here. We'll copy this, and we'll put it in the head. It's in there. If we go back and reload our page, right? Notice that already looks prettier, right? It uses a different font, right? It right. So let's look at the content in Bootstrap. Here at the beginning, it just shows you the way it's organized. If you download it, it downloads as a zip file, and that zip file, do I have it here? Course, Bootstrap, Northeastern, we have downloads, Bootstrap. There, it comes in as a zip file. If you open it up, it has some, the CSS is in there. Okay. We have JavaScript is in there. We're not going to use JavaScript right now, right? But next week, we're going to include it in there. Like, for instance, for the dialogues to work and for the tabs to work, you need to include this JavaScript, right? But these JavaScript depend on another library called jQuery, right? So since we haven't talked about jQuery just yet, we're not going to be using Bootstrap's JavaScript just yet, right? Next week, we'll include it. Also, some of the fonts in here. Here you have some glyphs. These are free images that are useful to decorate buttons and decorate several contents in your page, right? So they have vector graphics versions of these. In the CSS, you have the theme, you have the minimum, the minified version, and the CSS version. Okay, but we're using the we're using the linked version of this. Okay, all right. Another thing in here that is useful is way down at this page is that they give you some starter websites to get started, right? So the first one is the absolute minimum template. Okay, let's go and look at it. There it is. This is the template. This is 100%, and let's look at the source code of this. Let's look at the source code, view source. And so in here, the top is obviously some head and loading scripts and links and whatnot. Let's not look at that. But there's two distinct sections here. One of them is our very famous container. Isn't that what we were using last class, container? Remember that? But we did that, right? We built our own container, right? Well, they have their own container and it does exactly the same thing that we were doing, right? It added padding on each side, right? It centered our contents, right? And it had different versions of the container, right? So as you made the screen smaller, it made the container smaller as well. Okay, so let's do that, just that one piece. See how that works. Okay, so in our page here, right, that has just my hello world, I'm going to have a div with a class container in there. Right, there it is, and I'm going to put my hello world in there. Okay? And I'm going to refresh my page. It's this one, right? I'm going to refresh. Notice how it's now centered, right? It has padding on either side. Let me put it at 100%. That's 100%. Notice that this is as big as it gets, right? For this small screen. But as I make it smaller, I have less space. Notice that the size changes, right? Actually, it's already too small, right? Actually, let me see if I can make it smaller so I can show you the different. Okay, see how it changes? That's a breakpoint. That's a breakpoint right there. Okay, and then here's another breakpoint. There it is. You see that? So it's behaving exactly the same way that we had in last class, right? The container that we built. But this time around, instead of using our own homegrown container, we're going to use Bootstrap's container. Make sense? Right, which is much more robust implementation of the container. But it does basically the same thing, right? If we look at the, if we inspect it, we'll notice that the container basically it's giving a padding around, right? Using auto. There is margin left and margin right auto. That's exactly what we did, right? Okay. Also, depending on the size, you have different paddings, right? If you have bigger or smaller. Notice that the media queries are changing. See media query 992 over here? See that? And then as I make it smaller, boom, it's the 768 pixel media query triggers, right? And as I go smaller and smaller, there is no media query, right? When you become small and small on something that would look like what you would see on a phone, no media queries appear, right? Meaning you have the default behavior, you have the default styling. Remember, what Bootstrap does is that it targets as a default the phone. Yes? Everything else, all the other media queries, is to target larger screens, right? Right? But the default, it's just like its philosophy says, it's mobile first, right? First develop for the mobile, for the small screen, and then as you, your screen grows, then that's great. You'll get more space to show more details, more information. But it's a good idea to always start at this small screen first. Anyway, so that's our container. Let's look at the other stuff in here. Something else that it's in here, right? It's this nav. Well, we already know what nav is, right? It's a semantic HTML5 element, right? That says whatever's inside it's for navigation purposes, right? Okay, but we'll notice that there's quite a few things here that we're decorating that nav here. That nav, that's not Bootstrap, right? That's plain old HTML. But we have a lot of decorations here, a lot of classes that are declared by Bootstrap. Okay, one of the things that that are the names suggest what they do, right? Notice what does it suggest to you? That this is a navbar, right? It's something that's going to be shown way at the top, right, of the page, right? Also, this says is navbar fixed top. So that means that it looks like this navbar is going to be stuck to the top, right? Just like you would expect on a phone, right? That as you're scrolling, right, the header is stuck at the top, right? No matter what you do with the content, the header is always there. And inverse is so that it's black, right? It's white on black as opposed to black on white. Okay, so let's just copy this piece, only that piece. Okay, only that piece. Right, and let's just put some blurb in here. Okay, there it is. So it gives that black header at the top. It's empty. There's nothing in there, right? There's nothing in there. And notice that we have that problem that we saw when we created our header. Remember we did this header a while about a class ago, right? What was it, last class? I forget. Was it last class? Yes, we did, right? Well, how do we fix this? What was the problem here? It was because the header, right? What we did is that we fixed it, right? We fixed the position, right? And it removed it from the regular flow of the document, right? So what happened with the body is then it slipped underneath, right? And we fixed it by putting some padding to the body. Isn't that what we did, right? We said we'll fix that by putting body. What we did? Padding, right? Padding top. I think we used 50 pixels. Yeah, we did 50 pixels, right? So let's fix that. Let's copy that. Let's copy that, and let's bring it over here. right? No, not in the body, in the style, right? In the style. And again, I don't expect you to be using the style tag, right? That's a no-no. Me, I'm okay, right? I can do whatever I want. So padding 50. There it is. So we fixed it, right? So what else is in there? Let's look at their content. Let's see, so that we understand what's going on here. There's links in here. There's another container. What's up with that? They have a container inside of a nav, right? Why is that? Well, the reason they do that, right? The reason they do that is notice the content in there, right? The content says project name, home, about, and contact. See that? Notice the padding on the left-hand side. You see that? That padding is actually centered. If there's content on the right-hand side, it would be also padded on this side, right? So it's basically behaving like a container, right? It's just adding the padding and centering centering in the middle. Yeah, centering it to the where else, right? So it's centering it. So it's using that padding. So that's why they have that container in there. That's why they have this container in there, so that to add those padding. Plus, they have two divs in here. One div is for the header, and one div is for navigational purposes, right? So this heading over here, this header over here, is represented by this project name over here, okay? And the navigational piece, this navigational piece, is represented by these home, about, and contact, okay? But the header, notice that the header is a little more involved. It's not only the actual link for the home, like the home, right? But it also has these icon bars, these spans. These spans are only visible if you make the documents small, right? For instance, if I make it small, and become too small, notice that it toggles the nav. It hides the nav, and we did this too, right? Didn't we do this last class? We hit the nav also, right? But notice their implementation is pretty nice, right? They hide the navigational and they replace it with this kind of like pull down menu on the right hand side, right? So that if you click on it, right, you have the same exact links as before, home, about, and contact, but now this is you know, it's clickable, so I can touch it with my hands, right? And it's touch enabled, right? So this is a nice, you know, starting place for a project or experiments or whatnot. Okay, and notice that it looks very, very professional. It's you know, it's solid, right? Its implementation is solid. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this template as is, and I'm just going to copy it. And I suggest you do the same. Okay, so let's copy it in here, and let's just paste it in here. There it is. That's my hello world. Let me see if my hello world looks as pretty as theirs. Let's refresh. There it is. There we go. We have a starting point. We have a starting point for our website. Okay. All right. Okay. What else? Let's see. All right. So that's our starting point. I'm going to copy this. This is my kind of like my boilerplate. Let me stop this. Instead of this being intro, it's kind of like my boilerplate, my starting point. So I'll find my template. Okay. I'm just going to copy my template to keep going and building on top of that template. So it's a 0001. All right, so I am going to just like you're building a project, I'm going to be building a project throughout the semester. Okay. The project I'm going to be building is a course, an educational portal, right, where I can host all sorts of courses online, right, and maybe link the videos, the online videos, and put them together with syllabus and description of these courses, right, and list them here for everybody. Okay, all right. So let's see. The first page is going to be like my landing page, my home page, right? Which is going to be public. So let's work on the home page. Okay. It's home, and if I run that, it's still hello world. So let's give this a name, and we'll call this edu portal. Okay, and home, contact, and hello world, and so this is the edu portal. Okay. One of the typical things that that you see on some of these websites is that you have some kind of like splash screen, right? That has some marketing blurb and just try to grab you in and stay in there, right? So Bootstrap has some of that, right? Let's go back and let's look at some of the other examples. Here's one example, right? Where you have this placeholder, this marketing placeholder, right? That is useful, to put something to grab somebody's attention, right? It's like a screaming. I'm screaming at you. Stay here, please. Don't leave, right? Perhaps I might put a carousel here, right? That shows all the various features, or maybe links to my latest courses, and where they can click on it and right away they can jump into one of my courses, right? So let's look at the source code for this. Let's look at the source code for this page source. And where are you? There it is. It's what is called a Jumbotron. Jumbotron. Okay. And I'm just going to copy it as is. I'll copy it. Right. And I'm going to stick it right above my contents, right inside of my container. I'm going to paste that in there. Actually, instead of calling it home, I'll just call it Jumbo. So that it's clear what the purpose of this experiment is. Jumbo. We say that there it is. So we have a Jumbotron. We have a problem here, right? That my padding at the top is not enough, right? So let me fix that real quick. So in my Jumbo. In my Jumbo, I'm gonna add 20 pixels more. All right, I'm gonna add 20 pixels more. That should be enough. There it is. Okay. And in here, obviously, I'll have some marketing guide. Put some really nifty message here. Some very catching a message here, right? Some marketing blurb. So edu portal, and put here some marketing blurb, market blah blah blah. Okay. There we go. All right, so we have a Jumbotron, right? All right, so let's work on the content in here. One of the things I might want to do, let me copy this. Let me stop this. One of the things that I might want to do is to have some layout. Use some layout into 3 columns. This is a very common layout. So layout, a very common layout is to have something like this, right? Where you have your page, you have on the left side, you might have some sidebar, some main content, and another sidebar on the right-hand side, right? And we saw that grid system is very easy to accomplish using a grid system, right? What do? This is what? This is just basically a row, right? It's a row, and these are 3 columns, right? Column 1, column 2, column 2, 3 columns. We just have to make sure that we spread it across 12 columns, yes, right? So that maybe we could have this 2-column width that spans across 2 columns. This spans across 2 columns, and this spans across the remainder, right? So we have 2 to 4. 12 minus 4 is 8, right? So this might be 8. Yes, right? And we did this last week using the column and the row classes that we designed, right? Right. So let's try to do the same thing ourselves here, but now using Bootstrap's implementation. Okay, so let's so Bootstrap's implementation will look very familiar to what we've been doing so far. Okay, so we're going to do div class, the row. This is very similar to what we did in last class, where we created a row, and then we're going to create 3 columns. Right? We're going to create 3 columns. Now, the columns, div class, notice that we say column, right, dash. Those are the columns that we built last week, but there's quite a few more, or maybe not. Where are they? Why is it not loading it? It doesn't see it. Anyway, there's a column large 2. What's up with that column large? All right, so this is, I'll show you in a minute. This is left. This is the left column. We're going to have the same thing for the right column. Large 2. So this is going to be my right. And I'm going to have one in the middle, and that's going to be 8. Okay, and this is the main. Okay, if we run this layout, okay, notice that they're stacking up, right? And that's because I have a very small screen. Right, so I'm gonna zoom out so that it looks as if this were a larger screen than it really is, right? Notice that it lays out the way I was expecting it. We have left, the main is like it takes up most of the space, right? And we have the right on the right-hand side. But what's up with this LG? You know, what's up with that LG? Right? We didn't have that in our implementation, right? Well, look what happens here, right? Notice what happens here, that if I start making this smaller and smaller, I'm going to hit a breakpoint. See what happened? The container became smaller, and I lost my columns. What happened? Where are my columns? Where'd they go? They only work for large screens. You see that? That LG is saying I am targeting large screens. If it's not a large screen, I am going to the default behavior. The default behavior is that this is a small screen, a phone or a tablet, and I don't have enough space, so I will stack things, right? But I might decide that, no. I want the large screen and the next smaller screen to have the same layout. So I might decide that I have my 12-inch iPad, which is not out yet. It's big enough to show my 3 columns, right? So I am targeting medium screens. This means medium screens and larger, right? So if it's medium screen or larger, I want the 3 columns. If it's smaller than the medium screen, then it goes to the default behavior, which it's too small and it'll stack. Make sense? Right? So if I go back and I refresh, for large screen, notice that nothing changed, right? It's still 3 columns, but if I make it smaller and I hit my breakpoint, this is my breakpoint, see that? So I'm in my medium screen layout, right? And I'm keeping the 3 columns, right? If I keep going smaller and smaller and smaller, now I am in the small screen, right? And I go back to my default behavior, which is just stacking everything up. That makes sense, right? And I might decide, well, no, my 8-inch tablet should be able to view this as well in 3 columns, right? So I'm going to go even smaller and say, no, I'm targeting small screen. I want my 3 columns even in my small screen. Okay, so if I refresh now, notice that I go back to my normal layout, left, main, and right. Okay, and up until I reach my extra small screen, right, which goes down to the default behavior. If I really want to, even at the phone level, I want my 3 columns, which is somewhat unrealistic, right? But I am sure that I want my 3 columns. I can go even smaller and say XS. Extra small. So now I get back my 3 columns, right? So now I have 3 columns regardless. A very tiny screen, a small screen, a medium screen, and then a very large screen. That makes sense? right? You know, with this screen that I have here, I'm going to target just small. I'm going to target small. I'm going to target small because I already have a small screen here, and sometimes I want to see my editor on the right-hand side, right? It already makes the screen too small, right? So I'm editing and I still want to see it, right? So, so if I refresh, it's still there. If I'm inspecting, I have the inspector on the right-hand side, and notice that the screen is too small, and then it stacks, right? So, but at least it gives me some space to work with on the right-hand side. Make sense? All right. Okay. And all these breakpoints and all the what I've been telling you about is all documented, right? It's all documented if you go into CSS, right? If you go into the CSS tab, this is everything I've said so far is very well documented here, and I you know, I encourage you to come to these you know, to these pages, visit them, become familiar with these, become intimate with Bootstrap, right? So it's a very popular framework. You know, it looks great on your resume. And you know, if you're going to be working on websites, web applications, really, these are for mostly web applications, right? If you're doing web design, maybe Foundations might be a better solution, right? Foundations also makes it look very, very, very beautiful, but it's more geared towards, you know, web designers, right? Bootstrap is more geared towards web applications, right? Anyway, so let's see. So this tells you that it's mobile first, right? They also kind of tell you what to use if you're going to be displaying this on a phone, right? To put this meta tag at the top of your documents, so that make sure that it won't scale, right? Because these applications, these websites, even though they're using Bootstrap, right? When you visit them on the phone, it will scale down, right? The website to fit on your phone, so it will look tiny, 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 right? So you want to turn that off, you know, so that the browser, when it detects that it's being visited by a phone, right, it will say, you know, use the real width of the phone, right, of the device, as opposed to scaling it to fit on such a small screen. Okay, by default, the phone browser, right, will try to view it as if the way it would look like on a desktop. Right, that's what that's the default behavior of the Safari. At least Safari and Chrome, that's what they do, right? By default, you know, on the phone they'll scale it down as if you were looking at the desktop version. Okay, this turns that off. It says no. Use the real width of the device and do not scale. Okay, one to one. You know, use one-to-one scaling. Okay, you can also. It's not here. You can also turn off scaling, right? So people can't pinch and zoom, right, on you know, on their phone, so that it looks like an application, right? Real applications don't allow you to zoom unless you want certain areas or certain divs that you want them to zoom in and out, right? So you can control that. Okay. So user scalable, no. Right. Also, they also suggest that you include normalize that CSS, right? Normalize that CSS. Okay. What normalize does is that, remember that I had mentioned that browsers provide their own styling, their own default styling. Yeah. One of the ones that we played around with last week was the border, right? The 8-pixel border that the browser gives you, right? What do? The first thing that we did is remove that border, right? It says, no, I don't want that border. I don't want the default behavior of the browser. Well, not only I don't want that border, right? There's tons of other stylings that I do not want to inherit from the browser, right? Especially because they're not standard across all browsers. So something that I might do on one browser will look different on another browser, right? So to normalize, right, and make sure that I start from a clean slate of styling across all browsers, you should include normalize that CSS. Okay, so normalize that CSS. Again, it's open source, and it makes sure that all the browsers will look the same. Right? Well, anyway, it clears out all the things that browsers usually do by default, right? So that any styling that you do, right, are now consistent across all browsers. All right. All right, so definitely normalize that CSS is a good idea to include. Grid system. So they go into and says, well, you know, we use a 12-column system, which is very typical in the industry, and they have obviously the outer row inside of a container, and they have different versions of the columns, and here's the breakpoints, right? The 1200, right? That's for the really large screens, 992 for the medium screens, 768 for the small screen. And below that is the default behavior, which is phone, right? And so there is no media query for the small one because that is the default behavior, phones, right? And they give you the values here. They all for the different devices where the breakpoints are. They also our columns were kind of lame that we designed, right? One of the problems that our columns had, right, that we worked on last week, was that the columns were all right next to each other. They were flush with one another. Okay, so whenever we put content in these columns, the content was flush to one another, right? It looked pretty ugly, right? So what they do is that yes, they have the columns stacking right next to each other, right, floating right, but they add padding instead of the columns, right? So for instance, they add a 15 pixel on each side. So the columns really are, you know, you remember when we did 600? When we did 600, what do we do? If this was 600, each column was what, 50 across? Like column 1 was 50, right? But the next one was also 50 right across, right? And any content was just right next to each other, so there was flush to one another. That looks pretty ugly. What they do is that they add, you know, padding around it, okay, so that it looks better. So there's some space in between the content when they're right next to each other, right? Obviously, that needs some extra math to do that, right? Because the content actually is what the real content is. Say I decide that my padding is 5 pixels on either side. That means that it's 5 pixels, 5 pixels. The real width of this is 40 pixels, really, right? So our math would have been a little more involved if we would have used padding our implementation, but they do. Right? They take care of all that, which is nice. So yeah, and they call the distance between these two. They call it the gutter, right? You know, and you can set how big you want the gutter to be. Right? You can configure these things. Right? Right. So so here they're showing you the default behavior. Notice that there it is, right? So here are all the columns, 6 columns, and they have different versions, right? Column 8 width, and then or 4, 3 of 4, 2 of 6, right? This is pretty much the exercise we did about a week ago, right? And I encourage you to read through it, right, and become familiar. Not only do they support a grid, but they support nested grids. So grids within grids, which is pretty cool, right? Like tables within tables, right? So rows within rows, and columns within rows within columns within rows. So you can alternate, right? Which is pretty cool. What else? Okay, they go into the fonts that they use and the sizes, the different headings, blah, 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 all that. Okay, so let's start doing a couple things here. Let's go into tables. All right, so tables, you might have seen, tables are pretty lame. They look really ugly. The default rendering of tables in HTML is pretty ugly. So Bootstrap gives you a nice way to make them look professional or look really, really nice. Okay. So let's create here. So that's the layout, right? Let's see. That's the main layout. Let's create a list of courses, right, in a table format. How about that? All right, so let's copy this. Close that. I'm going to do copy paste, and that's tables. So 003 tables. Okay. And let me go down here. And so in my main contents, which is this is my main content, right? I'm going to put a table in here. Table. And since we're going to do, since we're using tables, it's always a good idea to use table headings, table heading, and table bodies, T-body. Okay. The heading, as it suggests, is the top row, right? That has it's bolded. It's the heading for that particular column. Let's create a couple of a T row here and a table heading here. Maybe this is the course ID, and maybe the course has a title, and it has maybe a category. Maybe has credits, and maybe it has the costs, right? Right. And then in the body, we might want to do. So let's look at let's see what that looks like. So this is my table. It looks awful. It looks really ugly. Let's add a couple more things. We'll say table row here, and we'll have TD ID is 1, 2, 3. And the course title here, maybe this is Angular JS 101, and the category is Angular, and maybe the credits is 4 credits, and the cost is $50. Okay. So if we render that, there we go, right? It looks pretty lame. Looks pretty lame. But we can very quickly make it look professional by adding classes here. We can say that this is a table. Right there, it already expands, right, to the entire width of whatever the outer container is, and adds some border coloring, right, to distinguish this between rows. Let's add a couple more courses. Oops. What did I do? Okay, copy that. Paste, 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 paste. Heck. Did I leave a TD open somewhere? TR. That looks right. Okay, let me refresh. There it is. So I have several courses, right? I must like AngularJS a lot. We can add maybe some stripes, right? So some stripes, and we can say table stripes or striped. We refresh. Notice that it gives some background color to the odd rows and no color to the even rows, right? Okay. I might want to decide to register for one of these. Okay. So to register, maybe I should have to what time this goes. 1:30. 1:30, right? 1:25. Okay. So let's add one extra column at the last one. I'm going to leave it empty, but I can put a link on each one of the rows, right? But the heading is going to be empty, right? If you leave something empty, it's always a good idea to put in non-breaking space, okay? And in each one of these columns, I'm going to add a table row with a link. That doesn't go anywhere, and that says register. Okay. If I show that, it looks like a link, right? But it's pretty ugly link. It could be a link. Oh, I might want to make it look like a button, right? Although register kind of looks like it's going to take me somewhere, right? As opposed to maybe that's a button that you can click that will take an action, right? And to paint it as a button, we can use a very common Bootstrap class called Button, BTN. And then after you tell it this is a button, you can then paint it in different ways. So you can paint it in the default color, default. There is, which is just some gray, right? Or you can say the primary color, which is it's blue, right? Or it's painted some like green, like inviting for you to do something. So it's success. But these are standard colors in the Bootstrap palette, right? These are very well-known names like success, primary, danger, warning, info, right? These are very well-known labels in the Bootstrap jargon, and they have dedicated colors for each one of them, right? So if you want text to be in the success color, so I will paint it with some shade of green, right? So there it is. So there's green, right? And I like that. I'll copy it. I'll copy that TD, and I'll paste it elsewhere. So here, 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 and here. There it is. So register, right? So registering might want to take me somewhere, and let's say that it takes me to a registration page. I guess I should put the URL here, right? Register.html, right? And in the registration, let's have that number 4. How's that? This will be 0004 register. Okay. So I'm going to copy the template. And I'm going to copy this one. And this will be 04 register. 04 register. And it's a good idea to lay out your pages even before getting started with linking this to the database or making it work, right? Because it gives you an idea of the entire navigation, right? If the navigation works, right? If the logic works, right? And it'll make evident different actions that need to occur, right? So this is a nice top-down design effort, right? Where you are first designing the top level, right? What the user sees, and this drives everything else. It says, "Ooh, I'm going to need a service that returns to me a list of courses. I'm going to need a service that allows the user to register, right? And things like that, right? So everything's going to be driven from the front end, right? The front end is going to decide what are those services I'm going to need. What data model am I going to need? What do I need to represent in the database for all this, right? But it's going to be driven from use cases and from navigations that are driven from a user-centric design, right? Anyway, so here in the registration, I'm not going to have the Jumbotron. Okay. So in my register, I'm going to refresh. I'm going to click on register. It's going to come here, right? And it's going to have at the top. It's going to have here H1, the name of the course. So maybe Angular JS 101. So I want to register for this, right? And I want a form that I need to fill out, for instance. So that'll give us a chance to play around with a form. Okay, so let's create a form. Let's look at some of the form elements in Bootstrap table. So let's go to forms. There it is. So forms, they're very, very powerful in Bootstrap. Notice that the default behavior is to display them stacked, right? Label, input, label, input, label, input. But you can make them responsive, right? You can make them responsive so that you can lay them out either vertically or horizontally, or you can lay them out, like in a grid system where you have the labels on the left-hand side and the fields on the right-hand side, right? And this is responsive in that if you start making it smaller and smaller and smaller, and this form doesn't fit, right? So let me type something. So if it doesn't fit, right? This still fits. Okay, now it doesn't fit. And notice what it does, it stacks them, right? So it's the same form, it's the same exact form, right? But it's responsive form. We did this, right? We did a very simple implementation of that. We have an idea on how to do this from scratch, yes? But let's use their implementation is, you know, is industrial strength. Why bother reinventing the wheel? So let's copy some of this, right? Here's a form. I'm going to copy this over here, right? And I'm going to paste it here. Okay, I'm going to close the form. Oops. Form. Okay. And let me refresh my page. I'm going to close that. Close that. Close that, close that. There. I'll refresh. There's my page, right? And it's responsive, right? Wait, let me make it bigger. Wait, why aren't you? What? Why aren't you? Oh, I need to say that I want it. Probably need to say that I want it horizontal, inline. No, not inline. Horizontal. Where is it? Horizontal. Oh, there it is. Must have copied the wrong one. Horizontal. Where's mine? Refresh. Why are you not? Hello. Oh, maybe the outer is too small. Let me see. Did I copy something wrong? Or maybe I put it inside of a column that makes it too small. Control, blah, blah, blah. Let me see if I copied from the right place. Just want to make sure. Form group. Okay, there we go. I copied from the right place. So yeah, so as this becomes smaller and smaller and smaller, it stacks. See that? And it has nice padding on the right-hand side still, right? So this is what would it look like on a phone, which is perfect, right? Because I can scroll up and down, right? But as I have more space and I'm now on my tablet, I get my 3 columns back, right? Okay. And maybe on when I'm registering for the course, perhaps I don't really need the right-hand side column, right? So I'll remove that and I'll have more space for my column, for my form. So this will be 10. So it expands, all right? Make sense? All right. So what do we want to ask here? We want to ask maybe for the email. What else do we want to ask for? First name maybe. For oh wait a minute, no, that's first name, and that's an ID, right? And the ID is here. First name, email, so this text, right? ID, first name, placeholder. Oops. So there we go. Notice that it's also flush. It's right justified, right? So it's so it looks nice listed across. Okay. So anyway, so I could create a whole bunch of forms. The last one, the last element is I want a button, right? So I'll have maybe a button at the last one, with no label. Maybe an empty label. I'm breaking space. I probably want to do an offset there instead of a label. But let's put a button here of when you want to register. So this button, register, and this will be class button, primary. Okay, there it is, my register button. Buttons can also be typically on a phone, what we want to do is that the button takes up the entire space that is given to the right. So what you can do that is you can say button block, meaning take up the entire width of your container, right? So for instance, when I make it bigger, right, it becomes that big register button. You see that? There it is. Okay. What else? Okay, let's leave it here. Now let's do Bootstrap. So there have been some confusions on whether you can use Bootstrap or not and whatnot. So let's do something. You can use Bootstrap for everything, okay? Experiments and for projects. Well, let's leave the home page, okay, free of Bootstrap. Right? Your main page has to look perfect. It has to look beautiful, right? It has to be responsive, okay? It has to have links to all your projects, your experiments, everywhere else, right? It's your first page that you might want to send as a resume or include it as a showcase, right? So it has to look very professional. But just so you have the experience of working with a grid system of your own, instead of using a grid system out there and you get experience on how to can you multiply without a calculator, right? Can you do that? Practice in your homepage. Okay, so the homepage, no Bootstrap. Experiments and project, yes, Bootstrap. I've seen some of the experiments you've been working on. They're very, very simple. Please go back and make them more interesting. Okay. And documentation is not just a sentence, at least paragraph. Paragraph is at least 3 sentences. Also, make sure you have links to your source code. Right, so we can look at the source code. Next week, when we start using GitHub, it'll be easier to link all these documents. All right? Okay? All right, thank you.